So our session today, protecting vulnerable population, understanding precarious immigration status, refugee rights, and immigration detention. This seminar series is for settlement service providers. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the people of Turtle Island, the sacred land on which we are gathered today. It's been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land on which OCASI is situated is traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. This territory was the subject of dish with one spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We are all treaty peoples and responsible to uphold those agreements, including those of us who came here as a settler, as migrants, either in this generation or in generation past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. It is important to us from our outset to express our solidarity with Indigenous communities across Turtle Island who continue to experience colonial violence, including intersectional gender-based violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. This webinar will explore the challenges faced by individuals with precarious immigration status, including how status can be lost, the rights of the refugee claimants, and the realities of immigration detention. You will gain a deeper understanding of the legal, systemic, and human impacts on precarious status, the asylum process, and the protections available for refugees. We will hopefully dive deep into recognizing the complexities and risks associated with precarious immigration status, advocating for the right and dignity of vulnerable individuals, understanding the Canada-US Safe Third Country Agreement and its impact on asylum seekers, contributing to the creation of more compassionate and just immigration system. Our today presenters, Anna Ulloa, Settlement Counselor, Canadian Center for Victims of Torture, and Anas El Hassan, Settlement Counselor, the Neighborhood Organization. Anna is bilingual settlement counselor at the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture, she/her, where she supports Spanish-speaking refugee claimant and individual with precarious immigration status, drawing on trauma-informed anti-oppressive approach. Anna helps clients navigate the legal and systemic barriers that impact access to housing, healthcare, and community integration. She holds a Bachelor of Art in Psychology and brings both academic training and frontline experience to her role. Anna passionate about fostering cross-sector collaboration to create more responsive and coordinated support system for vulnerable newcomers. Her work is grounded in a belief in dignity, equity, and the transformative power of compassionate service delivery. Anas, him, is a multilingual settlement and resettlement professional with extensive experience supporting refugees and immigrants, fluent in English, Arabic, Tigray, Bailin, and Tigrinya. He provides personalized support to newcomer students and help foster inclusive, welcoming environment in schools. I hope I pronounced the language description is, right. Anas has contributed his expertise to organizations such as polycultural immigrant and community services, Malton Neighborhood Services, and the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees. He holds a credential in interpretation from American University in Cairo and completed training in project management and various professional development courses. And currently pursuing a diploma in social work, future strengthening his commitment to community support and advocacy. I think now I will stop sharing my screen and pass it on to our speakers, Anna and Annas.
So first of all, welcome everyone. Again, thank you so much, Tarana, for putting this together. I was looking at people in the chat and what they're saying, which places they're working from, or where do they have this connection with the settlement part of things. And it was just very nice to see that we have people from everywhere, and we have people from many different backgrounds, like legal, health, and settlement language as well. So what I wanted to start first, and we're gonna learn many things about what a precarious status means, is to have everyone kind of put it in the chat to share one word that they associate with this term. When you think of precarious status, which word comes to mind? Okay, we see people saying invincible, sorry, undocumented, stressful. We see people who say worry, at risk, uncertain. Vulnerable is also one that really comes to mind. Fragile, stuck. I like that one as well. Barriers. So I think we have like many in the same topics around how vulnerable a person is when they are in a precarious status, how unstable, and sometimes also how stuck you can be when you are under precarious status. People like were also mentioning like the stressful portion of it, and also they were mentioning kind of uh, one that stuck with me was the first one, invisible, just something that people don't really take into account, for example, in different systems. So if we can go on this next one, Anas. So again, on what is a precarious migration status? And this is also though something we're going to cover are the common pathways into precarity and also who is the most affected. First of all, what I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that this is something that is not a legal term. But this is something that it just describes a condition of insecurity. So, for example, when people say or when they use precarious immigration status, they refer to people who don't have permanent residency or citizenship, or may not have any temporary or no legal status in a country, or people who are facing constant risk of detention, deportation, or denial of rights. So this is something that I really like to kind of put it forward just because this is not just about legality. This is a term that comes that it refers to also power, who doesn't have power, who has power, and also the access, how it impacts the access to services and the ability to live with dignity. So everything that everyone was mentioning in the chat, it was very spot on of what people with precarious immigration status go through. If we can go to the next one. So again, to just know who are the people who get mostly impacted, what are the examples of what someone would say they have precarious status, would be, for example, refugee claimants. And I want everyone, like now that we're going through this list, I want people to kind of say yes if they have worked with people in this list, or they can think of like they meet the precarious status portion of it. So if you have worked with them, um, also mention how often these overlap or shift. For example, how often do you see that a refugee claimant becomes someone who doesn't have any immigration status? Um, and again, as we see in this list, we have people with expired visas or permits, undocumented individuals, temporary foreign workers, international students that go out of status, and also victims of trafficking or family breakdown. And what I wanted to mention about this is, as you see, and as we have seen, this is something that it often either overlaps or shifts a lot. So if we can go on the next one. So just to kind of again keep touching on how they overlap and how they shift, I just wanted to kind of bring to everyone's attention of like, these are the common pathways into precarity. For example, if you have a visa expire or a permit gets canceled, this means, like, for example, either if you were working or studying legally, then this status ends. So this is kind of like one of the things of like, you're already in a country, you're already in a place, either working or studying, and then after the permit gets canceled, that would mean that now you're staying without any status and going into precarity. The second one would be if you have a rejected refugee claim. You and many people have shared here like how they work deeply with like refugee claimants. You would know kind of the fear that they have about possibly returning to their countries, but also they have that fear. They decide to stay in the country, but now they don't have any legal protection. This could be true too. I know that there's many pathways that they can reach to come out of the precarity, but sometimes in these common pathways, we're talking about the people who were not able to kind of circle back and try to attempt, for example, an appeal process. The third example that we have here is also a family breakdown. This means, for example, if there's a sponsorship that was withdrawn, or if, for example, the abuser controls the status, this is when we also will see a common pathway into precarity. I was actually going to say the same thing, Tarana. Thank you so much. If anyone has a question, just please put it in the Q&A section. Another one, again, losing a job when it's tied to a work permit. So there are work permits that are attached to a specific organization or company. So if, for example, they decide to let you go, to lay you off, then that would mean that you are also out of a status. So again, as we can see, like it's very kind of, I wouldn't call it simple, but it's something that it can happen to anyone. Of like, you, for example, would be laid off, and this is this added vulnerability of like, if you lose this job, now you don't have any legal status. And also we have exploitation or fraud. So, for example, if people are brought into Canada, or they even stay in Canada due to misinformation by employers, agents, or sponsors, they could be under the belief that they are working on a legal pathway and they're trying to find a status, or they have a status. And sometimes this could be false, because what they're actually going through is a type of fraud. So sometimes they go to from like simple. Uh, Kind of, it wouldn't call it simple, like it would be more of like this schemes that they would go through, that they would tell them, no, we're working on it, I have applied, and they're trying to pay, like, for example, a legal representative, and then this at the end, it doesn't mean that this is true, or that you have a secure legal status. If you can go on the next one. So for vulnerable population, what I wanted to people to kind of again use the chat, and we're trying to use the chat a lot just because we have a very big group of people. So um, this is just so that everyone is able to participate, and I can read a few of the responses. So if you can, so right now we're going through like the different vulnerable populations that we're gonna see. And I just want everyone to mention like what additional barriers do these group face? Try to share at least one in the chat. Language. This is something that I especially see a lot in the work that I do. Um, Housing, it's something that is repeated again. Not approved diplomas, yes, like their credentials assessment, sometimes it doesn't go through. Employment, loneliness. Again, we have a repeated one of the lack of recognition of foreign credentials. Isolation. So kind of what we can see is that this is something that again we have when it's about a precarious status, we have overlapping and we have shifting. This is the same when it comes to vulnerable populations. We have overlapping and we have shifting as well. So for example, what we're trying to do right now, or the exercise right now, is we can take one of these groups, for example, people with disabilities, and we can have and say that they would be probably they are at risk of being isolated. So this would be kind of the overlapping that we can have between these different populations. If we can go on the next one as well. Yes, I think I just want everyone to keep in mind that as these statuses overlap, as these vulnerabilities overlap, each one of them bring different rights, different risks, different barriers to kind of the way that we approach life and settlement. So the impact of precarity would be something that I know most people here will see day to day. And it's this, for example, poor access to healthcare, sometimes due to language barriers, housing insecurity, which is something that it has been repeated throughout the chat multiple times. Sometimes we see fear of police authorities, especially if it's someone who doesn't have any, they don't have an immigration status. And as a lot of people have said, trauma and isolation is something that we see a lot. If we can go on to the next one. So this is on what we can do and the role that we can have in addressing this precarity, which I think I wanted to make a note of, even though I have been talking about kind of like precarious status, vulnerability, I don't want to kind of just say that this is all that there's going to be, and that's why people like you exist, people like me and you and us here exist. And it is because even within all of this, we're able to kind of explore people's strengths. So for example, we can address this precarity by using inclusive language and intake, meaning if you are able to speak that person's language or using language services, you are trying to address this precarity. If you focus on their needs and not their status, as this again is just goes beyond any type of paperwork. The referrals to trauma-informed legal supports. This is something that probably they will need if they're in a precarious immigration status in order to come out of it. And then also advocating for access. A few examples are here. For example, the access to kind of OHIP or healthcare, the access to housing. We are able to, or fortunate to be able to advocate for this type of populations. We're able to kind of pick up that phone and speak to direct services, so that we can ensure that they have appropriate access. If we can go on the next one. So I just wanted to kind of bring up this case study to kind of just put a face for the purpose of this webinar. Her name is Fatima. And this is someone who is a Nigerian woman fleeing from FGM, or female genital mutilation. She has a visitor visa that has expired, and she also has had her refugee claim rejected. This would mean that she just became undocumented. She now has an abusive partner who also leveraged her status so that he could be able to kind of have a status as well. And they eventually got a temporary resident permit through the support of services, kind of like the ones that we provide. So what would you think that it would be something very important to work on when it comes to Fatima? Again, having this knowledge about precarious status and vulnerabilities, what would you identify as a vulnerability and how would you address it? Yeah, we can do. Uh, can we do like maybe a few people participate like that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, Sambal.
Hi, Anna. Thank you. So I think one of the first things is the abusive partner essentially threatening her with her status, right? Because a lot of people that I also have worked with, that fear essentially prevents them from taking any action, right? Even if you were to provide them with options, they're so fearful of what that partner can do, and that because of that, they now have to comply with anything the husband is asking, right? So it's really, really important to talk about their rights in Canada, even if they are undocumented. You have to talk to them about their rights, that the decision of her status still does not lie in the hands of her husband, right? So that is one vulnerability. And then being undocumented, she might also be afraid to go and ask for help anywhere, because she might think that she'll be asked to provide documentation, which will be a big barrier. And so I think that's why it's so important for organizations who support clients without documentation to be really, really supportive and provide them and let them inform them of their rights so that they can take their steps and make a proper plan on how to address each need.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to kind of share a few comments and say that I really like what you mentioned about, for example, explaining to them their rights, because even though they are undocumented and people may think like they don't have any rights, they do. And also because that would be kind of addressing what you identify as a vulnerability of the abusive partner in a way that you wouldn't be pushing your own agenda, you wouldn't be pushing any decisions on her. You would just be explaining what the rights and what she can access. And I just wanted to bring out to people that in a few of their, trying to organize like what I'm trying to say here. IRCC has identified that sometimes this can happen about having abusive partners and how that can be again can bring this vulnerability. So if for a specific pathways, I believe that there's a way that you can kind of like approach RCC and explain this without like losing your status or without your status being fully attached to a person, which again can leave you in a very vulnerable place and situation. So I don't know if someone else wanted to kind of
I think I saw
mention.
Safwat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there was
Oh,
someone
yeah.
else.
I just wanted to like just comment on just sort of the intersectionality there, as a racialized, undocumented woman who's going to face even more barriers. So even mentioning, like even talking about rights, like I think understanding that this is a person who is extremely vulnerable, and even if they are getting supports, there's a risk that they might sort of like face systems that might culturalize those systemic barriers. So I think just being like very careful about like even just the way that conversation is approached, if that kind of makes sense. And I think really for me personally as a social worker, just really prioritizing trauma informed, like really building trust, especially if this is a person who is like is in a very like heightened state of plays, really just building that trust, trying to understand like their story, like how they've come. I think for me, like that starting with trust and safety, I think is like a big piece for me before I even like get into anything else. That's just for me.
No, yes, I think it's very appropriate of like first, like for example, establishing that rapport and establishing that trust. As this is someone who has went through the refugee claim process, which basically means that first she's a survivor of FGM, and second that she was failed by the Canadian system at some point. So we need to be mindful, as you mentioned, of the intersectionality of being able to also build this trust with her. And as everyone, I think many people have been sharing in the chat, of being able to explain the situation very well to her, what her rights are, and also takes time to make sure that she has understood.
Anna, sorry, there was a just comment. What is TRP? I think it's
Oh,
temporary.
yes, thank you so much. Again, yes, TRP is temporary resident permit. If anyone was, oh, sorry, yes, someone was asking. Yes, it's a temporary resident permit. And I believe this is something that could be achievable again when there's an abusive partner involved. As again, IRCC has identified that this can be the situation, and that this can be the situation, and that they are able to kind of obtain a different permit to stay in Canada, and that is not attached to the abuser. For example, someone even commented, I assume that that she's our client. So it's just basically, again, we are not looking at statuses, we're looking at needs. And I do understand kind of like the precarity of like what this means. Maybe we can go on the next one. Oh, I'll touch up base on it in like at towards the end when it comes to questions. So just leave it in the Q&A and I'll go into that.
I think you already went through this, right?
Yes. Yes, so you can continue. Let me see where we.
Is it here? Yeah. this is-
Yes. Okay. Okay, so now we are back to what is the so ARAO stands for Anti-Racism and Anti-Oppression Framework. So in order to understand kind of this type of framework, we need to go from a root, it has to be rooted in social justice and human rights. It has to recognize power, privilege, and systemic oppression. And this is something that requires action, not just awareness. Even though sometimes people may be aware, this is something that it will require active actions towards this. I think we're gonna touch more on, for example, power and privilege and how this interact and the intersectionality of all of this later on. If you can go to the next one. So, who is it that we are supporting? We just need to be very familiar and become very familiarized to what the populations that we serve and how the intersectionality interacts. So, for example, we are supporting migrants facing compounded barriers, racialized migrants, and this is again to touch on the overlapping that can happen. Refugee claimants, undocumented people, survivors of trauma or violence, people for part of the LGBTQIA plus community, seniors, and disabled migrants. So again, this is just kind of to touch on the overlapping that it can happen. If we can go to the next one. So I'm just gonna leave this section to Anas. Again, please be reminded to kind of go into the Q&A and the questions will be answered towards the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Anas Al Hassan, and I will be going through this hefty topic. As we know, these days, this topic is one of the top trends here in North America. So STCA, what's STCA? STCA stands for Safe and Third Country Agreement. And this agreement is between Canada and US. And basically it says that refugee claimant must request asylum in the first country where they arrive, either it's in Canada or US. And this was founded back in 2004. It was meant to just stop shopping, like asylum shopping, as they say. Like some clients, they will say, oh, I don't like the life in US, I'm gonna go to Canada, or I don't like the life in Canada and I'm going to US. So that's why it was brought in the beginning. So as we know, it's been there since 2004, but it was okay. People used to use some other ways to come to Canada. For example, we have Roxham Road, where so many people came, and and they were accepted, they were okay. But with the recent change, what's happening right now? As of March 2023, we all know that this agreement was expanded to the entire US and Canada border, not just the official. Because before, as I said earlier, people used to use irregular crossing like Wrexham Road. Wrexham Road was a big turn for people to come to Canada. But recently, with the recent change, what's happening, you cannot come either to unofficial or official border to ask for asylum unless you have a family members here, unless you have somebody here who can say, yes, this is my brother, this is my sister, this is my family member, and it has to be very close family member, not friends, not very far. Okay. So what happening now, so many claimants are being turned down. Okay. And they don't have any protection, even though they are in a very high risk. Okay. And also those people, they're facing detention, and maybe they're facing deportation as well. And I have a very small case study here. A Haitian family was fleeing violence in the US, tried to cross the border through the wooded area. But because of the new rules, this family was intercepted and returned back to US. Even though they had evidence, they had everything, they returned them back. And the reason is why? Because of the STCA, which doesn't make any sense at all. Okay. Going next. So what happened? Why do they get detained? Who gets detained? Refugee claimants, as we know, most of the time they get detained because they don't have documentation. They the officer is not satisfied that this person or this documentation are legit. Um, on in another way, permanent residents who are facing removal due to criminality, and children who are not formally detained but may be housed in detention with their parents. So you see where the risk is at. Even families with their kids, they get detained. Going next. So as I say, why detention happens? First of all, maybe like for example, if you're coming from US and let's say back in 2020 or before the recent change which happened in 2023, and if you ask the asylum in US, they need to know who you are, what's your name. They need to know all the information about you, so they need to confirm your identity. And then they need to know, is this person safe to come to the country or no? That is he a threat to the public? And if there is any red flag, this will keep this person either in the detention or maybe the risk of returning him back or her to US. So what happens to those people? They have a mental health, like anxiety, PhD. Maybe they start thinking about suicide. And I have another example of a family separation. There was a family who came to the border because of the current situation in US. Some of the family, they were approved to come in to Canada because they have family, but because there is two adopted kids with the family, they were returned back. They were returned back, and this family faced now a separation. The family, they couldn't talk to anybody, so half of the family now is in Canada, half is in US. But if those people they had a very good communication, they can speak the language. Because of language barrier, the family was arrested and returned back to US, and the rest came here. But there is so many organizations on the ground who can support, who can have evidence, who can at least minimum give evidence that those people, if they go back, they will face so many risks. Um, Maybe because of like limited access to legal support or detention. Those people they face a lot of risks, and they face a lot of health concern as well. Maybe they're sick, they have diabetes, they need their insulin, they need uh, their bills. So many things happen during detention. So just repeating the kids part is basically um the scenario is the family, they had an adopted kids. They had an adopted kids and they had a they were family of six, two adopted kids and two like biological kids. The one who were adopted, they lost all the documents. So they didn't have proof for them that they are their kids. So they send them back because those two adopted kids, uh, they lost all the document while coming from back home. So they say they are undocumented. There is no proof that they are kids. So they send them back, even though they showed copy of the documents on their phone. But officer said he needs to see the physical documentation. So that's why the family was separated. Going next. So here in Canada, um, here in Canada, uh, immigration and CBSA, who detain people? CBSA, they detain people on the border or at the airport just to, as I said, to know who they are. Okay. Identity concern, like arriving without valid documentation. Sometimes some people they come, no document. What's your name? My name is Anas. Where are you from? I'm from Eritrea. Do you have a proof? No, I don't. So CBSA, as a kind of safe uh, way, what they do is basically they will detain this person, do a fingerprint, uh, do a research about this person, about his criminality or her criminality, and then if they really find out this is a true person, they will give them an identity or they will give them acknowledgement paper, and then they will take them in. But recently, what's happening, even though with the recent change, a lot of people are facing death because they're trying to cross illegally and try to hide here in Canada for 14 days and then apply for asylum. And with the recent change, with I know most of you heard about it, the Pill C2, um, which now there is OCASI are doing solidarity with the refugees, which we will share the link in the chat. You can read more about it, and you can fill out this form. So basically, they are trying to what they are trying to do is to stop the Bill C2, okay, and then to withdraw it at all and to terminate the STCA, because most of the organizations are saying that US is not a safe haven for all refugees, and also to expand safe pathways for asylum seekers, including streamlined family reunification, humanitarian visa, and also invest in fair and timely refugee processing, ensure dignity and rights for all. Okay, I'm going next. So here we have a case study. Samir is a 20-year-old from Eritrea, fled persecution and torture. He arrived in Canada through Toronto Pearson Airport using a false passport and claimed refugee protection immediately upon arrival. So what happened? CBSA, they detained him immediately because they couldn't know who he is, and what happened, and also he had no valid travel document. So what happened to Samir? He stayed over 7 months at Lava immigration. Sorry, this is mistyping. He stayed here in the Etobicoke Immigration Holding Center. Uh, Even though he had no criminal record and he cooperated with the authorities, and yet he was detained. Because why? They were trying to check his identity and know who he are. What happened to Samir? Um, Mentally, like he experienced severe psychological distress. Even he started thinking about suiciding and insomnia. Also, he had a huge mental breakdown. And even though after his release, uh, his hearing was delayed and he couldn't find the legal aid support that he was looking for. And also, psychologists say that Samir has a sign of PTSD. That's why he was released later on. And now I will leave the floor for Anna again. The floor is yours, Anna.
Coming back again. So thank you so much, Anas, for that overview. So when it comes to refugee rights and the barriers in the Canadian asylum system, as we mentioned, one of the vulnerable populations are refugee claimants, and this is kind of what a few organizations, or well, not a few, but like many organizations receive funding for as well, sometimes even less and less. So basically, Canada has a legal and moral obligation to protect refugees, and I want this to be known by everyone. Under both domestic law, which you can kind of review it. Maybe we can try to find the link, but you can also review it, for example, the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the IRPA, and also under international law. And again, the example for this one is the 1951 Refugee Convention, and that's where the name from like convention refugees come from. So refugee claimants in Canada have access to certain rights and protections, and this is something that it should always be shared with them. And it's, for example, they have the right to make a refugee claim at a port of entry or inland. As you may know, this is kind of something that it wants to be changed by the new bill that is being introduced. The right to a hearing before the Immigration and Refugee Board, IRB. Again, this is something that the new bill that was introduced aims to change. And access to legal aid in most provinces. Sometimes legal aid coverage doesn't include all provinces, but this is something depending on eligibility. They also have protection from refoulement, which means being returned to a country where they face danger. I think we are in a time, again, that we have seen, for examples in the US of this is something that has been happening as well. And another thing that they have is access to healthcare through the interim federal health program. So this is something that sometimes in my experience, I have seen that sometimes they do need help with protection and advocacy to kind of have this right protected or respected, and the right to appeal or seek judicial review in many cases. So again, it was very important to familiarize yourself with kind of the new changes and everything that is being introduced by IRCC, just because in order to be able to protect vulnerable populations, we need to be familiar with kind of the most fresh information that we can have in the different processes and things that are happening. And I know that for many of us here is also not as part of kind of our jobs, but also as we see it as our moral obligation as well. So if we can go to the next one. So again, on barriers, I just also wanted to mention, if you keep having like questions and things you want to say, please use the Q&A function. So barriers and real life gaps. Again, despite the rights that we just mentioned, many refugees face barriers in accessing fair and timely protection. And this is things that we have seen many times. For example, delays in their hearing process and long processing times. Sometimes it can go over 2 years. Limited access to legal aid or interpreters. What Anas just covered about the Safe Third Country Agreement, that this excludes many at the US-Canada border. We also have biases or inconsistencies in decision making at the IRB. We also can see mental health struggles, poverty, and difficulty accessing housing or education, and sometimes no right to work for several months after arrival, which again, it would be adding towards kind of this overlapping vulnerabilities that we have been covering in the beginning. So again, and this is one of the reasons why refugee claimants is part of the precarious status, because even they do have an status, there are these many barriers that they would be facing, these ones and many more. So if we can go to the next one. So again, we have a case study here. This one is again Fatima, using the same name. Now we seeing a 32-year-old single mother. Wait, was this? Sorry, I think I'm gonna leave this to Anas actually. Yes.
No worries, no worries.
Yes, I was like, hold on.
Yeah, so we have a case study here. It's about a mother uh, uh, who came from Yemen, fleeing the ongoing civil war and threats from the local militia. So basically, what she came to US and then she crossed illegally at Quebec border, and she was hoping for a safe haven and a good life for her two children. So what happened basically, she was allowed to come to Canada because she had a cousin who lived here in Toronto. So she was qualified under the family exception according to the safe and third country agreement. Uh, so what happened next? What happened to her? So long delay. Her refugee hearing was scheduled 18 months after her arrival. During when she came, she couldn't work the first 6 months because she had to rely on shelter and food bank and also documentation. She had a lack of documentation. So what they give her the acknowledgement paper uh, to appear later on to the CBSA and to do her documentation. So this is delayed her process as well. And because of this, she has a very limited time to find the legal aid because nowadays there's a lot of lawyers, they don't accept legal aid. And another issue was interpretation. Because of um, different dialect and different accent, she couldn't find an interpreter who could understand her and understand her accent. So they keep postponing her appointments, and also even after finding a lawyer, it was very hard for her to find an interpreter who can easily deliver her message. Also, mental strain. Her and her children, they experienced anxiety, isolation, even because even though after they got the brown paper, they still cannot find any mental health services. And this is again goes back to what Anna says, lack of knowledge, lack of information or guidance. So what happened after 2 years living in a limbo, Fatma was granted refugee status, but the process left her emotionally drained and financially unstable. Her children lost 2 years of schooling because they were very traumatized and they had a lot of anxiety. They were in school, but they didn't go regularly because they were saying our future is not clear. But recently, she settled in a well condition, and thanks for our settlement agencies around the area who could offer a very good support. So the floors go back to Anna.
Yes, thank you so much, Anas. So coming back to like before I left it actually is sometimes kind of like really sad to me to cover like all the barriers and all the things that they face and to kind of have the frontline experience of like seeing it from day to day. So kind of pulling away from that, I just wanted to kind of introduce everyone to kind of understanding how power and privilege interacts and how we can use all of this to kind of be able to empower and protect vulnerable populations, which is kind of which is the objective of what we're behind. So now that you're seeing kind of the wheel in front of you, I wanted to mention which category, pick one category from the wheel that stands out to you and type it in the chat. Oh, let me see. I think we need to enable. Tarana, is it okay if we enable the chat?
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much. So now that the chat is enabled, please kind of pick one of the categories within this power and privilege wheel that stands out to you and why. Someone mentions a skin color. Someone mentions age, and it's because they thought that young persons would have more privilege, but it also makes sense to them. Citizen, degree, able-bodied. Yeah, and this is again this wheel as it mentions below, this one is it comes from the Canadian sorry, the CCR. So that's why we have like some mention of the CCR in it as well. People also mention gender, sexuality, health issues. And we also have the comment of its missing income level, which you are right. Citizenship is skin color. And yes, and just to bring to your attention, the further that you go from this wheel, the further that you also go from people who hold power and privilege in our society. And the closer that you go to it, the more privilege, which also means the more power you will have in this society. So if we can go to the next one, thank you so much for replying. Or actually, if we can go back. What I also wanted to touch on, kind of covering the wheel that we have here, is that someone with legal status might also still face systemic barriers, such as, for example, racism, trauma, poverty, or discrimination. So this is again to say, for example, as mentioned, refugee claimants, they do have an immigration status, but why is it on their what we consider a precarious status? And it's because of all the barriers that we see that we already mentioned that they face. And it's because even though they have a legal status, this doesn't mean that they will not be facing any systemic barriers. So in this way, a legal status does not equal no systemic barriers, and we need to also be very cognizant about that. And also something again that I kind of touched on before is that someone who has a precarious immigration status or no official status may also have rich community ties. They could also have a strong resilience. They could also have many support networks. And this is something that the status doesn't reveal. This is something that the status may not reveal. So for example, even if we see someone who has a precarious immigration status or they don't have any status, we may think of all the vulnerabilities that they have. We may think of all the barriers that they face. But as I mentioned before, there are also many things that they could also have for the examples that I mentioned. So we just also need to kind of take a look at the person as a whole, even though there's a lot of overlapping and there's a lot of shifting, and there may be a lot of areas that they will need help with, many areas that they don't. It's just a good idea to always have this balanced outlook on the people that we serve. So if we can go to the next one. So, as I mentioned before, the anti-racism and the anti-oppression lens, why is this important? Why does this matters when it comes to advocacy? And it's because dignity requires context. And I want everyone to remember that dignity requires context. Just because precarity is shaped by systems, not individual choices. So as we mentioned in the beginning, precarious status is not a legal term. So means something that we are able to all acknowledge that it exists, but this is not something that it comes from a legal context. This is someone that it comes from more like a social context of how it's shaped by the systems. Also, status alone doesn't reflect lived experience. So again, this is to mean that, for example, someone who is a citizen doesn't mean that they have not faced any vulnerability in their lives. And we also must ask ourselves who is being left out of these conversations, who is unseen. I remember in the beginning when people thought about precarious status, they mentioned about being invisible. So this is exactly what we're doing. We're trying to think of who is being invisible when it comes to this system, this shaped system that we have. If you go on the next one, sorry, I forgot to say that. So these are some more practical anti-racism, anti-oppression practices for frontline workers such as yourself. So this is again everyday tools for be able to provide equitable support. For example, use language access tools. For example, if you have access to interpreters, if you speak the language, use it. If you are able to translate within your agency all the handouts to have cover more languages, that is also something that would help a lot. Also provide trauma-informed care. This means, for example, when we were talking about the Fatima case about the survivor of FGM and also who had an abusive partner, we're talking about asking for permission, avoiding assumptions. We are not assuming that this person wants to report their abuser. We're just going to ask permission if they want to learn about their rights, if they want to learn about the options that they have. This is something that is trauma-informed care. Respect their autonomy. Again, I think I really wanted to mention this earlier on, but I think it skipped my mind. Respect everyone's autonomy. We need to empower service users to make their own choices. We are not imposing the choices that we want them to make. We need to ask them what is it that the choices that they want, where is it that they want to aim. Acknowledging sometimes how difficult thinking in the future may be if you are in a precarious immigration status as well. And also avoiding gatekeeping. For example, advocate for access even when the system resists. We were talking about one of the temporary residency permits, I think it is, for when you are a survivor of domestic abuse. And someone mentioned in the chat how now they ask them to kind of be out of status in order to be able to apply for that. And this is something that the system is resisting, and this is why we are advocating for the access, the appropriate access, because as we may know, losing a status overall, it's something that is going to be an added kind of an added precarity. If we
I
can-
just want to add one point here as well to Anna.
Yes, go for sure.
Is as we know, like here in Toronto especially, we have so many settlement workers from different backgrounds. So approach them, ask them to help you, to support you. They're more than welcome to support because they will make the communication easy, to deliver the message accurately. So just look around, look for resources, try to see uh, who speaks this language. If you don't have an interpreter, or if you cannot, you can do a referral. So uh, just a little bit research, and then I think, and give him the power, will give the power to the client, and to just give the client the feeling that you are safe, you are heard. So always, when you speak to a client in your language, would make life easier. Going
Yeah,
next.
thank you so much, Anas. Can you go into the next one? Yes. I don't know. Are we allowing people? Or I don't know what to ask them.
Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't know if I was allowed to to talk or just make a comment on the chat. So I just wanted to add, because I think that that is really important, to add the importance of outreach and to keep connected to like other organizations as more as we can as workers. So because when you have a personal connection with another worker, I feel that it's easier to open a door, right? That's what I think, that advocacy is important, but we need to do a lot of work, uh, before trying to connect the client to some service. Like we need to reach out to as many organizations and as many services as we can before, like doing that work before starting trying to connecting the client with someone. Do you get what I mean? So the outreach is essential, in my opinion.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you
Yeah.
for that comment. As Maria said, yes, outreach is a huge part of our field. So in order to do an outreach, you have to participate in events, reach out to organizations, school, community centers, hand out flyers. For example, what I do as I am a school settlement worker. So what I do in my example, I go to the classes, I reach out to the parents, to the community centers. Okay, um, even though if I don't speak their language, I'll try to connect them somewhere else. But I do have to do my homework as a settlement worker. I do have to have a list. Oh, who speaks Tagalog? Who speaks Hindi? Who speaks Urdu? Who speaks Spanish in my organization? If we don't have, who speaks this language outside? Because even though, especially with refugee claimants, I believe uh, sometimes communication matters. They speak English, but they cannot deliver the message in a way that they want. So thank you so much, Maria, for sharing this insightful ideas. Thank you so much. The floor is yours again, Anna.
Yes, I believe that this is something that can certainly be included on their anti-racism and anti-oppression practices, which is become familiarized with all the services that we can try and find and outreach for. And also, for example, when you were mentioning about how do we come together for like advocacy and how like to kind of rely on one another, I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that we do have many umbrella organizations, including OCASI, and we're just gonna kind of maybe touch more towards the end of more of that what would be the word, more collaborative effort of the way that how we advocate, for example, when you are part of a settlement organization as well, or a service provider. So advocacy in action on the ground, the real life support strategies that we have is attend hearings or appointments as moral support when appropriate. When it is for the portion for the hearings, it is accommodation that has to be requested by the lawyer. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. And also, you can draft or support a strong housing, legal, or access advocacy letters. I want to bring the attention to this because this is something that I practice a lot, and this is something that I have seen that it can get you very good results. So just keep this in mind. For example, if the person is not able to speak the language, you can give them a very strong advocacy letter to kind of be able to support that communication even more of like this person was referred by this other service user. This is something that helps a lot. Many people have touched on this topic already of how important it is to explain the service systems clearly. to kind of avoid any jargon, avoid any bureaucratic terms, which I know, and I think I have been kind of at fault for it during the presentation. Sometimes we just assume that these terms are well known, when in reality they're not, but it's just because of our day-to-day, we use them so much that it just becomes so familiar to us. And also document systemic barriers and advocate collectively. This is just something of like what it was mentioned of like this lens reminds us that we are looking beyond paperwork. We're looking to the whole person's context, needs, and rights, rather than assuming that a status equals worth or ability. So this is something that I just want to kind of want to be on one of the takeaways. If we can go to the next one.
I think we already touched base on this.
Yes, it's
Um,
yes. If you want to can go and then I don't know.
yeah, it's
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So, just about OCASI and what we have learned. I had the privilege to be with Anna and other team members to be on the advisory committee members for OCASI to develop and update learning materials for settlement workers and other co-workers who works in the field. So now recently the materials was on the learn at work.ca, and also Tarana will touch base on it and tell you more detail about the course, because to be honest, those the foundation of settlement workers are amazing, and we work so hard. We work so hard on it, and most of the information that we talked about today, you can find it on the chat. The links are there. And now maybe I'll give the floor to Trana to touch more based on it. So yeah, the floor is yours, Trana.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Of course, this work couldn't have been done without advisory committee, which you both were part of it, and it was very intensive, and it's very intensive and productive time. We all worked with external consultant, our advisory committee, and developed new content for our foundation of settlement work. I'm not going to go into details, but from the participant who would like to take the course, I can stay at the end after question answer section and talk in more details. But I also posted on the chat room how you can look our catalog. That's my contact. Thank you, Anna, sharing the slide. How you can look all courses that OCASI offers. It's on our Learn Network platform. And then you can also look at the upcoming courses. Most of them are self-directed, not facilitated. It means you studying in your own time, your own pace. And currently, Foundation of Settlement Work Ontario Level 2 is open for registration, and it will be closed by July 12th. And after question and answer section, if someone interested, I can take you through the platform, showed you how to enroll, how it works, and maybe give you short information about what Foundation of Settlement Work Level 1 includes and what is Foundation Settlement Work Level 2 includes. Thank you. Back to you, Anna and Anas.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna stop share and I'm gonna share again. I'm just want to, because I saw people in the comments talking about the safe third country agreement. I'm gonna just share one link. I'm gonna share my screen in a minute.
Yes, while you're sharing it, I just wanted to touch on like what people are sharing. Like, for example, how is it that we shape these systems? How is it that we're able to kind of do all of this? And for example, advocating against the bill. Again, rely on the umbrella organizations that you have, for example, in this case, OCASI, and us will be kind of sharing what they're working on. There's also the CCR, the Canadian Council for Refugees, which is something covered even in the in part of what they're gonna show. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so here is what basically it says, the article. Solidarity with refugees. And you can see the article is in English and French, and then it explains all the things about the bill C2, what's happening, and what will happen if this bill is implemented. So people now are taking action with the Canadian Councils for Refugee. They're signing an open letter, and also they're encouraging people to write to their MP, and also Amnesty International are trying to send message to the Minister of Immigration to just take action toward the STCA, and also to withdraw it at all, not to just extend it and try to do it more difficult for asylum seekers and refugee claimants to come to Canada, because most of those organizations, they do believe that US is not a safe haven for refugees. So I do encourage you all. I'm gonna share the link again in the chat. I do encourage you all to sign it and try to take an action, because those people, they really deserve a help, a minimum we need, because they don't have a voice. In a way, we can be their voice. We can support them, we can help them, and we can change anything. But it doesn't happen between a day and a night. It takes time through advocacy, outreach, um, uh, like reaching out to member of parliaments, politician. You, there is a way, in a way and another. Okay, we have to keep fighting. We have, because refugee is not a choice. It's something happened. That's why this person is a refugee. They're not refugees by choice. So we have to kind of support, push forward, and wish for good luck. And I think now we are at the end.
Thank you,
Thank
Anna and Anas. Again, I would like also thank Martin and Amina, our sign language interpreter, for your help. And please stay online if you would like me to take you through the platform and talk, show you the OCASI's Law Network platform.